Hello, and welcome everyone to our bonus episode of the All Me podcast. October is Substance Abuse Awareness Month, and we are delighted to have a special guest here today, Lauren Sisler. She is a gymnast, an ESPN sideline reporter, author, mom, and we can't wait to have this conversation with you. Lauren, welcome.
Hello. It's so good to see you again. We got to meet a couple, I guess it was a couple years ago at the
Yes.
Choice Summit.
Yes.
Maybe it was early last year. And you said I am a gymnast. Can we just make sure everybody knows I'm a has-been? I
Okay, a
was a
former
gymnast.
gymnast, but not always a gymnast.
I wish, 41 years old. I take my son to gymnastics practice. He's 2. And I always look at the girls flipping around and I'm like, there's that part of me that wants to get back out there. And then there's that other part of
Yes.
me that's like, my body would break in too.
I
So,
get it. So,
all the
Lauren,
things.
we're going to dive right in, if you don't mind, just to kind of have you start in sharing your story. One of the things I loved that is a theme throughout all you do and in your book is fall in love with your story. And that is what you encourage everyone to do, which is just such a great message. Tell us a little bit about that philosophy.
Yeah, we all have a story, and it's something I've discovered as an ESPN reporter. I go out and I share people's stories for a living. But for so many years, I was so ashamed of my own story because I carried a lot of shame with what happened to me and to my family when I was just a freshman at Rutgers on scholarship, competing in gymnastics, and lost both of my parents within 5 hours of each other to prescription drug overdoses. And so that whole idea of falling in love with your story for me became my fight song, because in so many ways I lived with shame for so many years and I hated my story. I hated where I came from. I hated the things that happened to my family, the tragedy. And then I realized that I've got to step into this because this is my story. This is who I am. This is what built me and ultimately didn't break me. And so now I've got to use that and help others to fall in love with their story in the process.
I love that you have that philosophy, and not only has it helped you, but so many others, similar to the Taylor Houghton Foundation, where Don and Gwen, they lost their son Taylor and they turned that tragedy into the Taylor Houghton Foundation.
Yes.
And so they, were turning hard things into really good things that not only helped them, but others. So thank you for sharing your story and encouraging others to do the same. So
Yeah.
let's kind of take things back to your childhood. Kind of tell us about, your family, how things were, growing up, how you loved, discovered your love of gymnastics, kind of take us back to the start.
Yeah. So, I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. Yes, I say y'all a lot. Some people argue I'm not from the South, but Virginia, I'm from the southwestern part of the state. And so, I grew up, my mom, my dad, my older brother, Alan, and we were really just, that sports family. My brother was a 3-sport athlete, and pretty much my parents got tired of taking me to the ER time and time and time again with all my rambunctious energy. And they said, all right, we got to do something with this girl. So they enrolled me in gymnastics at the age of 3. And really the sport just took off. It was a sport that I fell in love with. I dedicated all my time to. I played like 1 season of basketball. My dad was the coach. And then it was like, okay, you're going to have to pick, because gymnastics just became it. And, it was one of those things. I just built on it and started traveling all over the state of Virginia and eventually regional and national competitions. And it was just my absolute love, and where I was so dedicated, so it was just part of my life, and where I obviously have lifelong friendships, relationships, family, but also taught me a lot of life lessons. And I think it taught me a lot about resilience. And little did I know that lesson and those lessons were going to be really critical for me in the tragedies that followed, obviously, as I hit, 18, 19, 20 years old.
Yes. Kind of keeping with the gymnastic, what events did you participate in, and did you have a favorite?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Gymnastics, obviously, it's 4 events: vault, bars, beam, floor, right? And in gymnastics, when you're competing, like, you've got to do them all. Like, even if you hate one of them, you still have to do them all. Everyone always, balance beam is always the one that gets people a lot. I didn't hate the balance beam. I went out there, I was usually pretty confident, but I will tell you my favorite events and really what I became good at and specialized in when I got to Rutgers was floor and bars. And people are always
Okay.
shocked by that because I am 5'9", way too tall to be a gymnast. And I actually grew when I got to Rutgers 2 more inches, which is usually uncommon for women to continue growing, right?
Yeah.
beyond, our high school years. So those were my two events. I love it. And, the floor is always just fun because you get to like get out there and dance and like
Yes.
perform. So yeah, those are my favorites.
So you mentioned your height. So obviously, did that help? Did that hinder? How did that impact your, gymnastics career?
Well, I mean, it definitely forced me to, I had to adjust because even when I was at that lower level and coming up 10, 11, 12 years old, I started hitting my growth spurt. So, I was 5'2", 5'3" at the time, but that's still, I'm growing at a pretty quick clip, and it was a big adjustment, especially as I got into my teenage years and started, growing even more then, because it's just that adjustment. Gymnasts are supposed to be short and compact and, just muscle brick houses. That was not me. I was long and I was lanky. So I had a lot to combat in all of that. But, I'm glad I stuck it through.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And that's really what we teach here at the foundation is, you can accomplish any of your goals the right way, through hard work, determination, good nutrition. And so that just kind of shows that you stuck with it and,
Yeah.
really made it to the collegiate level and did fantastically. In that world of gymnastics, we understand, there's so many pressures, from performance to body image. Did you see a lot of that, when you were a collegiate gymnast?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the body image thing is certainly something that, um, as you mentioned, is a big part of the sport, right? Gymnastics kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily has a bad rap, but definitely there are concerns a lot of times about, how gymnasts are perceived with their body image and how their, nutrition. Are they taking care of their bodies? Are they being too hard on their bodies? Are they eating enough and that sort of thing? And so that definitely was a big part of the gymnastics world. I will say though, the gym that I came from and I guess, the culture, I never experienced that personally. And I'm very thankful for that. My mom and dad never kind of raised me that way. There was plenty of junk food in the Sisler household. I hate to say it, but it's true. And it was just one of those things, being mindful and doing everything I could to stay healthy. But it was never something where I ran into issues of starvation or body dysmorphia. But you do see it in
Mhm.
our sport a lot. And it can definitely be a major issue that can impact people for their entire lives. And so it is very important to address that early because, especially as women, we do struggle with a lot of times body image and body dysmorphia because, especially social media and those things nowadays,
Mhm.
tell us what we're supposed to look like and how we're supposed to look and what we're supposed to eat and what we're not supposed to eat. And so I think it's important to really hone in on that. But I'm very grateful that I had a Coach Lisa and Coach Barb, that really encouraged me and never really shamed me for, especially when I started growing and developing as more of a woman later in my teenage years. I never felt that shame for, feeling or looking a certain way.
And that's so great because, we see today, especially as you mentioned, with all the pressures that are just coming, from inside and everything they're seeing on social media that, unfortunately, many are turning to substances for, appearance and performance enhancing. So,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we want to continue to reiterate. It sounds like you had great support both at home and in your coaches. And that's what we encourage is that's why when we provide our education to the athlete, but also the adult influencer, because a lot of times that adult influencer can have a lot of influence over the teen, and we want to make sure they're in a supportive environment.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to reiterate that. And the people that are listening, because as coaches, as mentors, as instructors, wherever you are, whether it's in the school system, club sports, you have an opportunity to influence these kids in a positive way. And so when you become a coach, so to speak, or you're in that role, you want to be able to have the opportunity to pour into those kids, right? And
Yes.
with that, having that opportunity to do so means you're kind of signing up in some ways to be an extension of a parent, right? An extension of a friend, of a confidant, of a mentor. And so I think it's so important to lean into that and recognize that we have a role to help our kids and to go out there and to make good choices and to educate them in order to do so. And it's a constant process.
Yes, yes. Thank you for reiterating that because I do think a lot of times that's the missing piece is that the people who are surrounding our kids and athletes, obviously are crucial in that support. So, speaking of just substances in general, you have a new book or not a new book, a book that's coming out newly in paperback this month.
Yes,
And
I
so we
know. We hit the
definitely
we hit
wanted
the
to
year
talk.
mark.
I know.
Woo! We
So
did
we're
it.
so excited that this month is the launch. We'll also have information show notes for how people can access the book. I read it. It's excellent.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
again, thank you so much for sharing your story and coming on again, like I said, to visit with us during this important month of substance abuse awareness. And so, you received very shocking news when you were at Rutgers, when you were what, 18 years old?
18 years old. Yep.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's crazy because I think about my story, and as we talk about falling in love with our stories, the shame that I carried for so many years because of what my story ended up being. Because here's the thing, growing up, I feel like we all have dreams, hopes, goals, aspirations, and we think what our life is going to be. And there's
Yes.
somewhat of a script to it in our minds, right? Like this is my life. And I grew up in a happy home and a family that supported me, as we've talked about. And I was so grateful for that. Two parents that loved me and my brother Alan unconditionally. And I go to Rutgers not only living out my dream, but also my family's dream
Yes.
because my parents had that dream for me as well to go and excel and to achieve, success in gymnastics and a scholarship. And so I'm at Rutgers living the dream, doing everything as, I hoped. And, I get a phone call from my dad to let me know that my mom died. And this was the middle of the night. I'm studying for exams, like nothing out of the ordinary. And it just was so shocking to me because I just talked to my parents on the phone hours before. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. And my dad said, look, get on the next plane you can. I'll be at the airport to pick you up. And so, of course, I'm frantically packing my bags, throwing stuff in a bag, trying to get a plane ride home. Because here's the thing, like this is back in the day when you don't just log onto an app and book a flight. Like I'm calling the airlines, I'm on hold for 30 minutes. I didn't even have $50 in my bank account. I had to use my, roommate's emergency credit card. So it is just scrambling to get on that plane, to get home, and to then walk outside expecting my dad to be there at the airport to pick me up. And instead, my cousin and my uncle were there to tell me that my dad, too, had passed away.
Yeah, I can't imagine, what that moment in time had to be like, all those moments in time, for you, Lauren. At the time as you were learning and processing all of that information, and again, so sorry for those losses that you experienced. What was your thought process, or what did you believe about their deaths, during that process
Yeah,
in that
it's
time?
interesting because as I sat in the backseat of that car, learning the news that my parents were now both gone, of course, shock was the first thing. And then the fear of like, now what am I going to do with my life? Like, how am I going to survive this? How am I going to live? Like, the ache was so deep and so painful. It was hard for me to even process like what I was hearing, what I was thinking, like all of that. And then when I finally had a moment to like sit in it and really think about like, okay, well, what really just happened? I just felt like my parents, they were going through some tough times with their pain and their medication. I had validated in my mind that my mom died of respiratory failure, which she did, but I spun it around to believe that she was taking medication and the medication ultimately shut her body down. It was not because she was addicted to the medication. It was just because her body couldn't withstand the drugs anymore. So there I tried to take addiction and remove that from the equation and say, well, this was just a freak thing. Like my parents were going to a pain management doctor and they were dealing with this issue. And ultimately it had its wear and tear on my mom's body. And then my dad, I validated, he died of a heart attack. So he just could not withstand the pain and the upset of losing my mom, and his body just shut down. Because to me, I tried to put it into a space of this was totally out of their control, and God took them from us, and it was totally out of their control. And that was what I was trying to manifest in my mind, because I did not want to believe that my parents had an issue with addiction and that they essentially took their medication, abused it, and overdosed.
So did you learn that they were not so this was, I'm assuming, prescribed medication. And did you learn, were they taking it as it was prescribed? Were they taking it differently? What did you learn as far as that goes?
Yeah, and of course, this would be a process. And to be honest with you, some of what I've learned did not come until the book. was released, right? Until we started writing this book, there were a lot of things that I didn't know anything about, right? Because I think for so many years, I kind of just ran from the reality of it, didn't want to unpack it. And at that point, the details, like we just kind of had to let go, just let go. And I just wanted to kind of move past that. But in those early months, as we're uncovering that, my family went to the house. My aunt and uncle actually went to the house before I ever did. My brother also. And from when the police came in and did an investigation, there were over 400 prescribed narcotics in that house, or empty bottles, but the quantity was over 400 that was prescribed to them at one given time. Like, what? And so, that's of course kind of like a red flag, but all prescribed to them legally. But ultimately what happened is my mom specifically was prescribed fentanyl because she couldn't manage the pain. She had degenerative disc disease. Dad had chronic back pain and his PTSD from his service in the military. And this pain that she was experiencing, OxyContin wouldn't touch it. So finally, the doctor said, let's go with fentanyl. Then you can wear the time release pain patch. And eventually that wasn't working. And so essentially my dad read online where you could put the pain patch in the freezer, freeze it, suck on it, and get the immediate high and euphoria that I think most addicts seek out when they've become when they've lost control of their, themselves, and are now just pulled into this addiction and this cycle that they can't get out of.
You mentioned that it was your dad, I believe you said, went online and read about, how to use the patches differently. That's one of the things that we also are learning is just so much misinformation
Yeah.
online, and we're
Yeah.
really recognizing there's a lot of social media influencers and things like that that are influencing kids on the appearance and performance enhancing substances, that it's a lot of times dangerous messaging and just so much misinformation, disinformation. Can you speak at all to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the misinformation, it's either A, it's lack of information, or B, it's the refusal to read the information, because I think we probably in many ways, all of us are somewhat guilty of it. You kind of say, "Oh, that's never going to happen to me." Not me. No way. Never going to happen to me, right? Not my family. No way. And so some people tend to turn their back on the information because they feel like it's not does not apply to them. It's not relevant for them. So I think those are the big key pieces, is that this education is important for everybody, because education then becomes prevention. And I think that is like the first step to all of this. But when you talk about athletes and stuff too, I was an athlete. I was there. I was literally dragging. I remember I had a stress fracture in my femur, biggest bone in your body, eventually turned into a fracture because I trained on it for almost 3 months without saying a word, because I did not want to get yanked from the lineup again. And so I was putting myself at risk in many ways with my injury, but I was doing everything I could to just survive. And I think that, especially as young athletes, when you want to just get out there and compete, it does not matter if this medication and this substance is going to make it feel better and allow me to go out there and compete. I'm going to go most likely going to take that. And I was that same person. So now, as a sports reporter and journalist, truth be told, I get a little triggered by it. When I see an athlete on the sideline, taking medication and, torn up knee, and they're back out in the game. And I'm thinking, okay, what are the long-term effect of this? How is this going to affect this person long-term? Because in their mind, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Do whatever it takes. Let's go. I was that same person. And still to this day, I still have that competitive spirit in me. But also I know how important it is to be educated, to be mindful, and to use that education to prevent potential detrimental and even fatal circumstances from happening.
Absolutely. Definitely factoring in the long-term effects. I think, it's that, that short-term immediate gratification. And so learning, just it's the same with our all me concept, is it may take longer to hit those goals, but you're going to do them and you're going to be able to maintain them.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so it's the same kind of concept. But, you talked about kind of the evolution of really coming to terms or grips with what happened with your parents. I know that was a process for you. And I think that really led to your Shatterproof, kind of mindset and mantra. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about how that evolved and developed?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, it just, as you said, long process. I could sit here and It often at times appears, that, wow, she's got it figured out. She's got it all together. But let me tell you, first of all, I ain't got it all together. And second of all, like it has taken me a very, very, very long time to get to this place where I can openly, boldly, honestly share my parents' story and my story and all of that and the shame that I carried, because really the evolution came because it was going back to Rutgers, trying to stay above water, trying to get my grades, keep my grades up, doing all that, and then avoiding flunking out of school, and then going out into the world and becoming a sports reporter. But with this, I was still carrying all this shame. And for years, it was telling that sugar-coated story. My best friend in the whole world for 7 years did not know how my parents died. And then eventually my aunt, eventually my auntie Linda started to really kind of break those walls down. I kind of talk about these brick walls I had built up just to protect myself and protect my family. And she really started to help me break down those walls and essentially help me to discover and realize, like, your parents aren't defined by how they died, but by how they lived their lives. And so for so long, I was trying to preserve their legacy, everything I could to preserve their legacy. And yet what I didn't realize is that, like, I've got a legacy of my own that I need to create. And I can't keep living in the past and trying to or hide or mask what happened in the past. I need to focus more of my efforts on the here and the now and what I can do to help others in the future. And I think that was such a big turning point for me. And again, it took a lot of time. It took baby steps to get there, and then to start slowly opening up and sharing their story and talking more openly about what happened. And then there was this freedom that came from it. This freedom that came from, like, wow, like the truth will set you free.
Yeah. You talk a lot about Shatterproof. That's the title of your book. Tell
Yeah.
us, what does Shatterproof mean to you?
Yeah, Shatterproof is interesting because, in the process of figuring out the title of the book, one of the hardest parts of writing a book is like, what do I title this? Like, you feel like it's such a big deal. It's like, it's got to be catchy and it's got to make sense, but it's got to encapsulate what you're talking about. And for me, Shatterproof really became the essence of, and this is how it was really, formulated. A friend of mine and someone that has helped me in my PR efforts as well, Gary Schneeberger, basically said, look, it's like someone took a baseball bat to your life, Lauren, shattered it into a million pieces, and you showed people through resilience, through grit, through determination, that you can take all those pieces and put them back together and create something beautiful for your life, even in all the pain and all the sorrow and all the devastation and heartbreak. And so that's really where Shatterproof came from. And that is what I live on and stand on now. As you mentioned, like, what does Shatterproof mean to me? It means that we live in a world where life is hard. Things are hard. We are going to face tragedy time and time and time again, adversity time and time and time again. It is going to smack you in the face. You're never going to outrun it. So instead of trying to outrun it, lean in and attack it. And that is where this Shatterproof mindset has come to me, is learning to really lean into it and say, hey, don't let this be the thing that breaks you. Let it be the thing that builds you.
Beautiful message, but I love the title. Like, I think it's the perfect title for your book. So you
Thank
nailed the
you.
title for sure.
Yeah, I'm
Hard
so
to start,
glad,
but it's
because I was
awesome.
going in circles, and it's like I wasn't even trusting the process and all of it. I was like, I just don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. But then it is become really the foundation of, like, my core message for people. And so it really has stuck. And I'm really grateful that we went for that. So it's
Yeah.
been good.
You nailed it. 10 out of 10. I mean,
Woo!
perfect. Yeah, I really love it. Yeah, it's great. So I love how you were able to apply and really move forward. Do you have any advice, for our listeners? Because like you said, all of our life situations and tragedies are going to look different, but they are going to keep coming. And so what advice do you have for people to kind of embrace that shatterproof mindset?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, as I mentioned, not running from it, facing it head on and being in it, because I do think that we spend a lot of our time running, 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 right? And I spent a lot of my time in my life running away from the reality, but then also running to this next thing, which is like, I want this and I want this and I want to be here and put me at the top of the mountain, right? No, like, you're going to have to climb that mountain. And the problem is we, especially, we're talking to our younger generation with the way social media is, we are always looking over our shoulder. What's everybody else doing? Instead of just focusing on the here and now and who we are and the things that built us and the things that make us and the things that make us unique and beautiful in our own way. And that is my encouragement is like, quit looking over your shoulder. I think it's great to dream. I think it's great to look up to role models, yes, in this world. But I feel like we constantly are always looking the other way. And instead of just being where our feet are right here in this moment. And it's something I've heard so many times in the coaching world and so many locker rooms. And it is something that I live by now every single day because I know we have one life to live. Time is non-refundable. And if you just run away, if you are constantly running and never standing right here where your feet are in this place, life is going to pass you by and you're going to be like, wow. And that's it. And so to me, I feel like it's so important just to encourage people to be where your feet are and to know that your worth and your value belongs to you. And you get to create this life of beauty and of resilience and, of purpose. And nobody else gets to dictate that for you. It's on you.
I love that. Yeah, Lauren, thank you so much for all those words of encouragement, wisdom, all of that. Speaking of getting to the next level, you are an award-winning, ESPN sideline reporter. So exciting. I love watching you on the sidelines. We'll get into especially your specialty in a minute, but I'd like to, focus on you're known for showcasing the athlete in a holistic view. Can you and their stories, and I love that. I think we all love the human interest. We obviously love the sports, but we also love the person. And so I think you do a great job, of that. So would you want to share with us just a little bit about that mindset? And then if there is one particular interview or game that really stands out in your mind as a favorite or something special that you just want to share with us?
Yeah, because I think it's important, like, to pull the curtains back, right? Because what we see in these athletes a lot of times, once again, is like the championship trophy, right? The confetti falling. But the most powerful stories aren't the ones happening necessarily on the field when the lights are on and the stands are full. It's happening behind the scenes. It's the grit, it's the determination, it's the setbacks constantly. Those are the very things that are shaping our athletes today. And I want that story to be told. I want people to see that. I don't want them to see just the beauty in all of it. They've got to see the hard and the tough because guess what? You're going through the hard and the tough. I'm going through it. We're all going through it. And if we sugarcoat everything our entire lives, then you know, we're giving off that false perception. We go back to what you said, like all this misinformation out there. We're putting out misinformation if we're just showing everybody the highlight reel all the time. And so that is why it's so important for me to, as you mentioned, kind of that holistic approach, really showing people for who they are and what built them and what made them and what gave them this opportunity to continue growing and thriving and fighting even in the midst of hardship. And so that's kind of been the big thing for me. And from that vantage point, just some of the different stories that I've heard one that resonates with me, dear friend of mine, Timothy Alexander, and I actually talked about him in my book, but he's got an incredible story. And this is a young man that lost his ability to walk when he was the number one tight end in the state of Alabama, in high school, lost his ability to walk after a car accident. And this was a young man that was ready to give up on life and said, nope, not going to do it. I'm walking away. Like I'm done, like checking out, done. And yet the doctor said, you'll never walk again. And they said, you'll be paralyzed from the neck down. Well, since then, he now is only paralyzed from the waist down. But the cool part of this is this young man, as the UAB football program took the death penalty, they shut down, they shut their doors, gone. He was at the front of that line, constantly cheering this team on and saying, we're bringing UAB football back. And you know who walked out on the field with the game ball when UAB football resurrected and came back? Was Timothy Alexander. That young man has so much fight in him. And when I say his message and what he brings, he is ultimately the inspiring, the person that you look at and you say, man, like you have been through it and yet you wake up every day with a smile on your face. Like that is who I want to emulate. If you're going to look at someone to emulate, it's someone like that, the joy that he brings to this world, even in the hardship. And so I would say he's definitely an affinity in my heart as someone that has just showed me the way and really gave me permission to fall in love with my story. And that is what has been cool about our journey and our friendship. And we're family now. He calls me his sister. He's my brother. He's helped me and given me permission to fall in love with my story because he showed me how to do it through loving his story, even in the hard.
Oh, I love the story. I love his inspiration. I love everything about I love how you guys found each other and were able to build each other up and encourage each other to continue on your journeys. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. I love
Thank
that.
you.
And so I had alluded earlier that, you're fun to not only listen to, but watch on the sidelines because you are very famous for the sideline shimmy. In fact, is that trademark? Registered trademarked? It should be,
I
right?
probably need to work on that.
Yes, because it is so cool. So tell us about the sideline shimmy. Tell us how it started. It's just so fun. Talk about
Yes.
bringing joy. You bring a lot of joy to the sideline. So
I appreciate that. The sideline shimmy, it's funny because a lot of people, if you go on social media, will be like, what is this girl doing? Like, I never claimed to be a good dancer, but, we're in the stadium. The speakers are on, the music is blasting, everybody is getting ready to go. It's almost go time. And it all started because when I would get on the sidelines and prepare for a game, I would be so hyped up and excited. The adrenaline was running through me, but I would also be so nervous. So excited and nervous at the same time. And I'm like, and my body would just take over and it would just go into total like meltdown mode. And it was like, I was just, I can't do this, but I'm so confident at the same time. It was just wild. And I'm like, what is going on with this? Like, why is my body not cooperating? And so I just started moving my body and dancing. And, I love to dance. I was a former DJ Sisler. And so, and I'm a performer. I love to perform. And so it's literally just became honestly a grounding exercise for me, therapeutic, helped me to redistribute the nerves. Y'all, the nerves are still there. Yes, I still get nervous when I go on TV. I get nervous when I go out on stage. Like, absolutely. It is part of being human. It is part of feeling. And I love that part of my job. And so, the sideline shimmy was born out of nervousness, and it became a sideline sensation. And, so it's kind of my pregame ritual. I dance on the sideline to kind of get myself ready in a groove for the football game. And it's just become a fun thing. And really my hope is to bring joy to people through that, right? Because I found my sideline shimmy, even in life's most challenging moments. I hope that I can encourage other people to find their version of a sideline shimmy.
well, you do that in spades. It's great. I mean, and it's hard though, when all that great, like you said, when you're in the stadium, I find myself as a spectator, next thing you know, I'm like, you just move to the music or whatever. It just makes
Yeah.
it more fun. You take it to the next level, obviously, but you just exude that joy. I can so picture you as a DJ. You just all of the things, like I said, you just, even though where your story started was hard, and I'm sure still hard every day, and even talking about it again today with me, but yet it didn't kill that joy, and you just exude joy all the time. And the sideline shimmy is just an extension of that. And so it's a lot of fun. We'll definitely be watching on the sidelines for the next shimmy. So,
Yeah.
we talked earlier about you being a collegiate athlete, and now that you're in the reporting world, you're around sports all the time. What would you say are the biggest changes or differences that you've seen just in sports in general, at the college level from when you competed?
Tell you what, I think the biggest thing, and we're highlighting it right here, mental health. Right? Because as athletes, there's such a physical aspect to it. People didn't want to address the mental piece of it. Because in sports, it's such a physical thing as an athlete. And you think about the grit that people have and just the strength. And the mental aspect of the game never really was talked about. And even in the sport of gymnastics, like half of gymnastics is mental. When you're going up there, flipping around, putting your body in contorted ways that are just not even human, and doing it in a way that's very risky and can create a lot of fear, there is a huge head game in there. Same with any sport, right? There is a huge component of the mental toughness that it takes to go out there and compete, to perform, and to find value in ourselves as athletes. And so I think that is probably one of the biggest things that I have seen that has transformed, because back in my day, as a former gymnast, like, we didn't talk about mental health. We knew, like, oh yeah, there is a mental toughness, and I would go through my routines and really like prepare and do that stuff. But really, in all honesty, we never addressed mental health like that. I don't even think that was a term that was really used back in, the mid, to late 90s, early 2000s. Like, we didn't use that terminology, but now it is talked about. And now you hear athletes standing for mental health, and you hear athletes using their platforms to speak up about it and say, like, that mental health, to a lot of, it's an invisible injury. It's an invisible weakness. people want to call it. But no, this is not a weakness. This is just part of who we are. And like anything else, we have to train our minds to overcome hardship, overcome doubt, overcome fear. And that is in the athletic world and in any space. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen is it's being acknowledged as a light that's being shined on it. And the stigma, while the stigma still exists, we're starting to see that break up and dissipate, which is very promising.
Yes, no, I agree, and that's, why even our message, we wanna make sure we can reach everybody, as possible because we are seeing it's the mental health, like you said, just from that competitiveness and being, field ready or gym ready, but I think also it's the comparison, it's the not feeling that you measure up, social media inundates us a lot with "you're not enough," and, we're trying to say the message is you are enough,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so but that's hard, and like you said, the good news is we're having more conversations about it, but the pressures also seem to be a little greater too. So, you're just trying to educate, and again, I think even the things you do, on the sideline and featuring the athlete as a whole athlete, that there's more than just the sport, you are a person, and
Yeah.
just to build that internal confidence
Your
in
identity
themselves.
should not always be wrapped up in what you do. And I think that can be very challenging because we love to judge ourselves based on what we do and our accomplishments, and our identity cannot be wrapped up in that because otherwise we're never going to feel like a success and never feel that we've achieved anything great.
Absolutely. As an athlete and as a mom, and as an ESPN reporter, just, in keeping the integrity in the sport, both from, like I said, an integrity perspective, but also a health perspective. As you know, we educate on appearance and performance enhancing substances. We have the All Me, which encourages everyone that they can be anything they want to be all on their
Yeah,
own.
I love that so much.
Oh, thank you. It really is. I love to because it gives that, like you said, that person that this is me, like take pride in all of it. And
Yeah.
so we want to encourage everyone that they really can be anything they want to be, all me. So how would you say that defined you as an athlete? I know we talked before a little bit about that you really didn't struggle so much with the body image things earlier in our conversation, but just that sense of accomplishing all on your own. Like how do you feel about that as an athlete? Just the sports in general that you report on. Talk a little bit about how that might mean, something specifically to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely, while I didn't necessarily struggle with maybe the body dysmorphia piece of things, I struggled for sure in like, am I enough? And I will say this, my parents, I was very fortunate to have parents that were extremely supportive and didn't put a lot of pressure on me in terms of, hey, well, you need this score to do this and you need this to do this. Like there wasn't a lot of that. And I'm very grateful because I have seen parents that can be very involved, almost to a point where it doesn't allow the child to just go out and compete. I was very fortunate to have that support. However, I put a lot of the pressure on myself of wanting to be perfect, wanting to impress, wanting to make sure that when I went out there and performed that I did it to the best of my ability so that afterwards that applause from my parents was well earned. And the thing is my parents were applauding whether I was, you know, sticking the landing or sitting on my rear end after I had fallen off the balance beam. But at the end of the day, I had put a lot of pressures on myself and that has transcended into adulthood. I spend a lot of time unpacking some of the pressures that I put on myself, that idea of perfection, right? Gymnastics is based on a perfect 10. There's not a lot of sports out there that are like that. And it's an individual sport. It's not a team sport until you get to college. And then of course, the Olympic level where you're cumulatively putting scores together. But all in all, gymnastics is a very individualized sport that is also very subjective. And I think in a lot of ways, it taught me so many great things, but it also wired me in such a way that I had this almost sometimes unrealistic expectation for myself of how to perform, how to be the best I can be, and then also how to do it all, be all things to all people. And that's where I really had to step back and say, look, I can't do it all. I can't be a million places at one time. I can't be all things to all people. And ultimately, I've got to take a step back and really prioritize what's important to me and to my family, and then let the rest take care of itself. And that can be challenging. I think for all of us that are sitting here listening, it can be very, very challenging. But sometimes we just have to take a step back, take a deep breath and say, all right, what does my focus need to be on right now? Where are my priorities at? How do I accomplish those? And everything else is kind of icing on the cake. If it gets done, if it does, but if not, no big deal. Grace, my friends. GRACE. Give yourself grace.
Yes, grace, word of the day, should be the word of every day,
Yes,
right? If we all had a little more of it, right? To
we all
ourselves,
deserve
others. Yes.
grace.
Yes, absolutely. Lauren, thank you so much again for joining us today. It really was an honor to have you here. Again, October is Substance Abuse Awareness Month. I think one of the things that helps us all in this is communication and talking and sharing with each other. And by you doing that, so important. Can you just kind of maybe just end with just some thoughts on that about the importance of communicating and sharing things with each other?
Absolutely. Communication is critical. And I'll say this, when we think about substance abuse and what it does, not only to us as individuals that might be struggling with it, but our families, the people that love us, the people that are around us. The thing with substance abuse and mental health challenges, we love to put them in the darkness. We love to stick them as far away in the darkness on the shelf where nobody can see it because of the shame that it creates within us. But that's the thing, and that's what communication does. It allows us to bring that very thing that thrives in the darkness, bring it out into the light, outside of isolation. And you know what? You say, me too. I've got this problem. I'm going through this thing. I need your help. Let's talk about it. Because when we all learn to talk about it and really step into our stories, step into the hard, then we all are better for it. And we create this community that is built on grace. We give ourselves grace. We give people around us grace, more understanding. And it allows us to create this dialogue and to give people, once again, permission to fall in love with their stories, the good and the hard and the tough and the challenging. And I think that is what is so important as we recognize this amazing month, because guess what? We've got this month and this is an opportunity. We need to talk about it 365 days a year, yes. But we have this month where we get to shine a light on this very topic, something that so many people struggle with. And it always warms my heart when I find someone that comes to me and says, this is day 1 of me in recovery. This is day 10 when they're early in their journey into recovery. Because guess what? They made a choice, and probably one of the hardest choices that they've ever made, to say, I'm going to do this for myself, for my family, for my loved ones. I'm worth it. And so when we can start talking about it, we can find value in that. And it then becomes a gift, not only for ourselves, but for others.
Yes. Thank you for shining the light, being the light, and teaching us
Aw,
all how to be shatterproof.
thank
Appreciate that.
you.
We are going to end with what we call our curveball questions.
Woo!
Okay, so these are
Okay.
just meant to be fun. Okay, so we're October, so I have to ask you, are we pro all things pumpkin spice, or lukewarm, or no way on pumpkin spice?
I'm probably a little bit more lukewarm. Like, I love some pumpkin bread, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not a Starbucks girl. I don't like coffee. I don't drink coffee. I've got my little energy in this. I'm just not a coffee girl. And so it's funny because I feel like pumpkin spice is always equated to coffees and teas. And I
Yes.
don't drink either. And I'm like, oh, but I do love some pumpkin bread. And I'll take that all day long. And I love all things pumpkin. Fall. It just feels like I'm in Alabama and it's normally 80 something degrees and it's finally fall. I've got my long sleeves on and I'm like, ooh, it feels
Yes.
good.
So nice. Fall is the best. I love
Yes.
the fall. I love the pumpkin bread, love pumpkin cookies, all the things.
All the
So,
things. Yeah.
okay, so we'll keep in our food I guess
Oh, good.
mindset.
Because I love some food.
Okay, well good. Then this is the perfect question for you. We'll end with, what's your favorite Thanksgiving side, with that coming up next month?
You
Or
can't
if you
ask me
can't pick
what
one, you can
you
have more than one.
I was going to say, you can't tell me to pick one. You know why?
Okay, no, you
Because
can have more.
I am a buffet kind of girl. So Thanksgiving is my dream because it's like a buffet smorgasbord of all the things. And I'll
And
tell
all
you,
day.
all day. I mean, all day. Absolutely. Now, I'm not big on leftovers, although Thanksgiving leftovers I will often do. But I will say this, my mom was a really good cook. really good cook. And I can't say that necessarily that was passed down to me. I try, but I'm learning as we go in my old age. But she always would make everybody's favorite sides. And so it was always like a lot of different things. Of course, I love the honey baked ham, like obviously is kind of like the main course. I'm more of a ham than a turkey girl for sure.
Okay.
But when it comes to sides, of course the mac and cheese and stuff is good. But one thing that I've been making the last couple of years that like I love, love, love is like it's like a corn pudding. And it's because I
Mm.
love the sweetness of it, but it's also got like breading in it. And so
Mhm.
that is a huge and that's become like my go-to because you like mix it with some eggs and some different things. But it's almost like it's a side dish with a little bit of sweet, kind of have that like dessert feel to it. And so, that's a big one for me. And then don't forget the rolls, dude. You know what? Like, don't you be sitting down at the table. If you forget those Sister Schubert rolls or those crescent rolls, we're in trouble. Okay. Got to
Yes.
bring the bread.
Agreed. Well, your corn recipe sounds great. You'll have to share it.
Yes, I
And
will. I
we
will.
love rolls, all things rolls. Yes. Well, Lauren, again, you are such a delight. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And we just wish you a great day. And next month, a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all. Grateful for you. Grateful for leaning in. Would love to connect with you if you have an opportunity on social media. If you got to listen in, would love to hear your feedback, hear your story. Keep on grinding, keep smiling, and fall in love with your story.